Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Pa Afif and today we're going to dive into one of the most important tools you need for research. It is about the independent t-test, especially for those who are still working with a thesis or research project. So mastering this material will be a huge advantage. Before I go further, I need to ask you some questions. First, what is the independent t-test? Do you know it? Simply put, it is a statistical method used to compare the average score or means between two different groups. Can you give an example? For example, if you want to find out whether male students and female students score differently on their reading tests, an independent t-test is the right tools. Before we go further on the explanations about the independent t-test, so here I have a research article that already been published by a Journal of English Language Teaching Scope. So it was written under the title The Influence of Shadowing Technique to the Students' Listening Ability. So here we have the variables, showing technique, and students' listening ability. So if you dive into deeper the abstract, so we can see that the researcher did the research to two groups. The first one is the experimental class, contains 34 students, and the control class that contains 35 students here. And for the analysis, the researcher applied independent t-tests with the SPSS 25 versions, and the statistical result analysis shows that the significant value of two-tailed is lower than 0.05. It has 0.001. Based on the result, the researcher understands that there is a significant difference between students who are taught listening by using the shadowing technique and who are not taught by using that kind of technique. So in the finding result, the researcher shows this table, and we can see that the significant value is 0.001 or less than 0.05. So the researcher mentions that uh, they conclude to reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternative hypothesis. So what is actually the independent t-test? To recheck again your understanding, the independent t-test is a statistical test used to compare the means of two unrelated groups. So we have control group and we also have the experimental group. What is the purpose? It's used to determine whether the mean difference between the two groups is statistically significant. Then there is a question, when to use an independent t-test. First one, when you are going to compare two groups like male or female students. So one belongs to control group, one belongs to the experimental group. Then it is used when the data is measured on interval or ratio scale. And the next one, the samples are independent of each other, and the data follows normal distributions and homogeneity of variance is assumed. So this is a kind of prerequisite before you do an independent t-test. What you should do is that you have to do kind of test of normality and test of homogeneity. There are some steps in conducting an independent t-test. First, you have to state the hypothesis of your own research. Remember, in the previous presentations, I already explained on how to develop a good hypothesis. There will be a null hypothesis and also alternative hypothesis. So the null hypothesis always shows that there is no difference between group means. However, in alternative hypothesis, shows that there is a kind of optimism in research. So the hypothesis says that there is a significant difference between group means. Then you have to test the assumption by doing what is called as test of normality and test of homogeneity, that the explanation will be delivered in the next video. And the third step is you have to calculate the t-statistic. You have to use the software, for example, like SPSS or any other statistical software. And the next one, you have to consider about the p-value, because in statistical calculations, the result belongs to something related to numbers like p-value. So you have to compare the p-value to the significant level, usually 0.05. whether it is higher than 0.05 or below 0.005. And the last one, you have to make decisions based on your interpretations of the p-value. You have to reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. And this is the rule on how to interpret the results of the p-value. So just like in the previous video when we are discussing about pair sample t-test, so the way to read the data is still similar. If the p-value is less than 0.05, it means that we have to reject the null hypothesis. So there is a significant difference. If the p-value is higher than 0.05, it means that we fail to reject the null hypothesis, or in understanding, we know that there is no significant difference. An example of an output of the statistical calculation using the SPSS, if the t table shows that there is a 2.31 score and the p-value is 0.024, or it is understood as below than 0.05, it means that there is a significant difference found from the statistical calculation. So it means that we have to reject the null hypothesis and we have to accept the alternative hypothesis. Now let's practice with the real mini research. For example, if you're going to do a kind of research with the title The Impact of Duolingo Use on EFL Students' Reading Comprehension Score, a quasi-experimental design. So from this title, we understand that this is a kind of quantitative study with a design of a quasi-experimental design. And we understand that there are two variables here. The first one is Duolingo and the second one is reading comprehension score. Before we go further, we have to develop our hypothesis. So based on the title, we understand that we have two hypotheses. They are null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. For the null hypothesis, we can formulate that there is no significant difference in reading comprehension score of EFL students who use Duolingo and those who do not. For the alternative hypothesis, we can make a statement like there is a significant difference in reading comprehension score of EFL students who use Duolingo and those who do not. And for example, we have this kind of data of the research. So we have 10 students, as already been done by the previous studies, that in this research, since the design is quasi-experimental, so we will have two groups here. The first is control group and the second one is experimental group. So in a control group, so we have the post-test score like this one with the color of yellow, and we also have the post-test score of the experimental group of the 10 students with the result in the orange column. Then to do the independent t-test, so we have to make a code for each group. For the control group, we can make a code of 1, and the experimental group, we can make the code of score as 2. So all the student score in the control group belongs to 1 as a code, and all the student score in experimental group belongs to code 2. After that, we can go to the SPSS. In the first part that you have to do is you have to go to variable view. So in the variable view, in column name, you can change the name of the variable into test score, and number 2, you can change into classes. In the label part, you can change the label for the test score into reading score, because we are going to do kind of analysis for the students reading post-test score. And then in the classes, we can keep the name with the classes because we will have a code. And here for the value, we can change the value of the classes by inserting 1 for the control class as a label and 2 as the value of the label experimental class. So you can see that if you already finished the click OK button, so you can find on the right part here that the label is changed. The label of reading score will be none, but the classes, the value changed into something like you can see on the screen. Then after that, you can insert the data by clicking the data view. So you can copy the score from 1 to 10 for a control group and 11 to 12 to 20 for the experimental group. And then you can also insert the code of the control group 1, like that one you can see on the screen. And also you can insert the code of the experimental group number 2 from row number 11 to row number 20, like what you can see on the screen. After you finish inserting the data, you can do the statistical analysis by clicking the Analyze button, then go to Compare Means, and you can click the Independent Sample T-Test. And you can see a box on the right side of the screen, and you have to insert the both variable into their positions, correct positions. So reading scores into test variable box, and then classes into grouping variable, like that one. Okay, then after that you can define the groups. You can click define groups 1 as 1, 2 as 2, and then you can go to OK. Then in SPSS you can find the result something like this one, and you can go to the t-test for equality of means. Then you can find the significant value of two-tailed research analysis. So you can find that the score of the significance is 0.03. Then going back to the way to how to interpret the data, we can understand if the p-value below 0.05, it means that there is a difference in statistic. So we have to reject the null hypothesis. But if the p-value is higher than 0.05, it means that there is not statistically significant, means that we are failed to reject the null hypothesis. So if you can see the data here, that the score is below than 0.05. So based on the independent t-test result, the significant value is 0.003, was less than the predetermined alpha level of 0.05. Therefore, the null hypothesis is rejected and the alternative hypothesis is accepted. So this finding indicates a statistically significant difference in the reading comprehension score between EFL students who used Duolingo and those who did not. The use of Duolingo positively impacted the students' reading comprehension performance. So, to wrap up, we can understand that the independent t-test is a powerful method for comparing two independent group means. Then we can interpret the t-statistic, p-value, and result carefully within the research context. If you found this video helpful, do not forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends who are also working on their research project or doing a language research. Thank you and see you in the next video.